What lives on Plum Island? If you ask anyone from Long Island about Plum Island, they are likely to tell you horror stories, tall tales and the like. You see, Plum Island is infamous for being home to Building 101, otherwise known as the Plum Island Animal Disease Center. Throughout its checkered past, ever since it opened its doors in 1954, the facility has been concerned with one thing: the contagious and often dangerous diseases that can infect animals, chiefly livestock. The island is shrouded in mystery, and to this day if you happen to navigate nearby you can see signs on the beaches that say, "No entry." So, when I got the job offer to work on the island, I was more than a little skeptical. I think the only reason I agreed was because I was adamant that I did not want to return to college for the fall, and the only way my parents would agree to that without kicking me out of the house was if I had some sort of job. To this day I don't know how my uncle got it. He always joked he had connections, and it turned out he wasn't kidding when I got a letter from U.S. Agricultural Department with a contract offer as an animal control specialist. The details were hazy and all I could glean was that I would be part of an animal control unit. Still, the pay was good, and I figured it was better than spending 4 months in McDonald's. I did not even mind when it specifically said that I would not be able to talk to anyone or return the mainland because at this point, I was a loner and had begun to consciously avoid people. Even in college, I would often spend my nights alone either walking around campus or reading, and I loved it. So, 2 weeks later, amidst a tearful hug from my mom and disapproving pat from my dad, I boarded the boat and headed to the island. Plum Island by itself is creepy enough. It is cold and often surrounded by a dense and murky fog. It is littered with ruins of old farmhouses and homesteads. Not to mention the site of the old Building 101. Yet it was so beautiful in its own way, and I was instantly at ease the moment I set foot on it. Once on the island, a supervisor filled in the details of the job. I and 2 other guys, X and Y, were in charge of exterminating all mammals on the island. We would perform regular patrols around the island, 3 times a day, and if any mammal was found, we would have to put it down and then dispose of the body by burning it. Gruesome, I know, but we had to do this to ensure that nothing left the island. If an outbreak got to the mainland, the results could have been disastrous. So we did our job, every day, every week for almost 3 months. The weather got colder, and the leaves began to fall. The island was our world. The researchers almost never left the research facility, and even when they did, they barely spoke to us. We 3 trackers became fast friends, partially because there was literally no one else whom we could talk to. Even though we had a TV, it earnestly felt like we were in another world. Everything on the television became almost alien, even news from our former towns. Instead, we knew every feature, every trail and ruin on the island by heart. For the first time in my life, I could actually say I felt at peace. And our duties? I think we had to deal with a total of 4 incidents, and although it was especially daunting the first time, we slowly realized that it had to be done. It was not like we were doing this out of malice, and I give credit to the facility for giving us the most humane means to do it. In short, it was a fairly calm, if boring job. Until December, that is. I remember it clearly because it happened immediately after the first snowfall. The island was beautiful, remote and silent. On the beaches, the snowflakes falling and the dark gray waves crashing made me feel as if I was in a painting. During our walks, it felt as if we were in another time. Only the ruins and dirt roads served as testament to man's presence on the island. But what I remember most was how in the snow, there were tracks of something. By no means was I ever an expert of tracking animals, but I know for sure that it was not the typical raccoon or deer that made those tracks. Although we were puzzled, I remember thinking it was a dog or perhaps some coyote that somehow swam to the island. Either way, it was our job to hunt it down, and that's what we did. Every day followed the tracks, and investigated where they led, only to find nothing. I swear we checked every burrow, every beach, and every ruin on the island, but we found no trace of the beast itself. Instead we found bloody stains in the snow, and ripped remains of birds that were literally torn into shreds. After about a week, we began leaving traps around the island. They were pretty archaic, and consisted of bear traps and tripwires in conjunction with nets. Yet despite all of our hard work, none of the traps managed to catch it. I cannot tell you how frustrating it was to see our efforts end in failure every day. These efforts did not escape the notice of our prey, however. We began finding dead birds in the most conspicuous of places. Each was killed in the same way, neck broken. Body savagely ripped to pieces. Blood everywhere. Sometimes they would be right next to the trap we set up. Other times the bodies would be on the paths that we traversed. X made the suggestion that it was playing with us, daring us to find it. It wanted to be noticed. And one night it got its wish. We woke up to find 3 corpses of the birds in front of our cabin. Most unsettling was how clean the bodies were compared to the others. Except for what looked like bite marks on their necks, the birds were completely intact. Trails of blood that led to the cabin came from the forest. It was obvious that it had dragged the bodies here and left them for us to find. The situation became more complicated as the creature's challenge did not escape the notice of the higher-ups, who began to show concern in our lack of progress. So we were given actual rifles and tasers, in addition to our lethal tranquilizers. We began to wake up earlier and hunt in the cold dawn. It was in one of these freezing mornings that we finally managed to get a glimpse of our enemy. First off, there are some things that can never be explained in the way you experienced it. The only way to understand is to actually experience it yourself. This is one of those events, and I have poured hours into just trying to find the right words. Bearing this in mind, I will continue by saying that the moment we entered that ruin, everything felt wrong. The first thing that hit us was the smell. It was rank and loathsome. It was more than just the now familiar smell of death. And when I shined the flashlight through the doorway, I swore I felt the blood drain from my face. The inside of the decrepit farmhouse was covered in blood and the carcasses of birds. Not just 2 or 3, but at least 8. The birds barely resembled birds anymore. They had been completely ripped to shreds, and the only common thread was all of their necks were broken and had teeth marks on them. I nearly threw up. And then we saw it. It was almost indescribable. It walked on 2 legs. I think, and it seemed to be an amalgamation of several animals. It was hairless and had so many teeth. It was so grotesque and unreal that my mind immediately went to Lovecraft and to horror movies. My brain did not recognize that it was real for a second, and all I could comprehend was the silence before everything erupted into chaos. In that instant, I realized that it was actually sizing us up. This thing that clearly could not be intelligent, that was roughly the size of a chimpanzee, and more monster than natural, was actually thinking. Then everything exploded as X shot at the creature. It screamed in fury and began to charge at us. Me and Y, so far still in shock, began firing at random. Apparently one of us hit it because it shrieked an inhuman cry and fell to the ground. Then before we could react, it picked itself up and ran through a hole in the wall to the snowy fields beyond, shrieking and howling. Of course we gave chase. It was not too hard to follow it. After all, it left tracks in the snow and a trail of blood. It ran extraordinarily fast and we lost sight of it quickly. My biggest fear was that it would swim away, to the mainland. Luckily, it either did not know how to swim or chose not to. Plum Island is not big, and after 10 minutes we tracked it down to its lair. From the moment I first saw it months ago, I had my suspicions that there was more to the lighthouse than met the eye. And now I know I was right. Blood streaks painted part of the wall that led to a broken window. It was all the evidence we needed to know that this ominous decrepit building was its home. I am not sure if it was because of adrenaline, but to this day I remember the moment, the calm before the proverbial storm, perfectly. I remember the looks we shared with each other. At this point I was not even scared. I was far beyond that. I was resigned to either dying or killing this thing. We had been changed, marked in a way by this experience, and we all knew this. We were contemplating this while in perfect silence that was only broken by howls of the early morning wind and the shrill unearthly shrieks of the creature inside. There was no rush. It was trapped and hurt. Badly. It was X who began kicking the door. He was the strongest of us, and was built like a linebacker. It was not long before the door flew open. There is a saying that a cornered rat is most dangerous. Unfortunately, this proved true then too. Before we could even shoot, the thing immediately hurled itself at Y, and began scratching and biting at him. Y began screaming at us to shoot it, and within seconds a dozen bullets must have been shot. When I opened my eyes, what was left resembled more raw meat than animal. The thing was now clearly dead. It was riddled with bullets, but even at closer inspection I could not tell what had been our work, and what it had originally been. Y was all right physically, but was a bit bloodied and bruised. Mentally, though, I don't know. He was very pale, and after we checked up on him, he said nothing. It was clear that he was disturbed by what had happened. Me and X discussed what to do with the body. It was hideous. Flabby skin, and a face that resembled that of a monkey. It was muscular, but covered in sores and pus. In one word, grotesque. He wanted to bring it back, and I just wanted to burn it and be done with it. His reasoning was that the scientists had to know about it. Mine was that we three would gain nothing by letting them know about it. In the end, I won, and we left its smoldering remains behind. As soon as we returned, our supervisor, one of the scientists in charge of the place, told us that our contract was done. Simple as that. No questions, no explanations, nothing but the command that we would leave on the next boat of the island. I never did speak to X nor Y, or anyone from the island ever again. I still do not know what we saw, and I have never returned to Plum Island nor sought to return. But, I have been keeping tabs on the facility, and although we never got any explanations, I have my suspicions. I have been reading up on it, and apparently they have had outbreaks that came from the island before. People have spoken out against the safety of the facility. But, I believe the people in charge knew what was out there. That is why they hired us. It was not about killing the one raccoon that somehow got to the island, it was about testing us against it. Maybe it did legitimately escape, but I believe that they let it go. Either way, they knew what was out there, and they did nothing to help us. They did not even give us any warning. They needed to know how strong it was, if it could outsmart people, even kill people. I don't know why or for what purpose, but we were the guinea pigs in a twisted experiment.